see the timer, I assume?
I'm looking at the time.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Speaking to Influence Live. I am Dr. Laura Sokola, your host from the podcast Speaking to Influence and author of Speaking to Influence, Mastering Your Leadership Voice. I am so excited to be able to play with some new toys today. Now, maybe this is old hat for a lot of you out there, but this is completely new to me to be able to do live streaming on YouTube and on Facebook, kind of all at the same time, and have the opportunity to engage with each of you. And I really hope that as more people join, that if you've got questions, you want to talk to us about podcasting, about leadership, about really anything you want, that you will just write in the chat box. Feel free to send any questions that you have, any comments, any stories you want to share. We would love to hear from you. And my guest today for our Lunch and Listen, i.e. Lunch and Learn, is none other than Mitzi Perdue. And Mitzi's episode just went live this morning. So 5 a.m. I hope everybody out there has subscribed to my Speaking to Influence podcast. We go live every Tuesday with a new episode, and we have amazing, amazing guests who represent everything from for-profit to nonprofit, larger and smaller, animal health and to people health, to environmental health, to business and online resources, in-person services, products, you name it. But we all share one really important theme, and that is the recognition that no matter what your industry, no matter how long you've been in the business, no matter how many degrees you have to your name or however much money you have made, the fact is that communication is an essential leadership skill. If you want to get headway anywhere in life with people, you have to be a good communicator. You have to be not just a visionary. You have to have people. You have to make people able to understand your vision and get on board with it. That's the influence. You, as the expression goes, you catch a lot more flies with honey than with vinegar. And it's not even about just that strength of persuasion, but helping people get it because they get you. And that's both art and science. And Mitzi is my guest today on our live stream here, as well as in the podcast. So be sure to go to iTunes, or if you don't have an Apple device, you can go to my website, which is speakingtoinfluence.com/podcast to get the episodes, or it's also available on all of your regular podcast platforms like Spotify and Stitcher and Omni and everywhere else. So do go, but if you can, please go to iTunes, look up speakingtoinfluence.com, and be sure to subscribe. Rate, by the way, we like 5 stars best. If you are on the fence, go for 5. Write us a review, and of course, any comments that you'd like to share, we would love to hear. But now allow me to turn some attention over to my guest, Mitzi. Thank you so much for joining me once again today.
Oh, I love being with you. And I love your premise about the importance of communication, because that sure matches my experience of life.
I would imagine it. And, Mitzi is particularly unique in her expertise because she has so many different life experiences that all boil together in this crucible of wisdom. And I love the fact that of her own right, of course, Mitzi, you have, I believe it's 22 books that you've written, independently and co-authored. The most recent one, of course, with Mark Victor Hansen about how to be up and down times, which I think is a wonderfully encouraging rule book, really, for all, or at least guidebook for everybody to follow in this crazy world that we're in now, having those little positive thoughts and being mindful of what am I allowing myself to think? What am I allowing myself to focus on? And what should I be focusing on to make sure that I'm as internally healthy and spreading as much external health to others that I touch as possible? I don't just mean physical health, but making the world a better place, frankly, which is really what we're all in it for. Isn't that what you told me your premise is, bringing more joy?
Well, the way I think I'd formulate it is I would like to increase happiness and decrease misery. That's my personal goal.
And what else could we ask for, right? That's the biggest goal that we should all have within our business, our families, our other relationships in the community. And one of your expertise areas. Aside from your books, of course, you were a syndicated columnist in 400 plus different publications across the country, which is absolutely amazing. I want to be you when I grow up. And but in particular, an area of expertise of yours is about family businesses, and both keeping business in the family and keeping the family in business. You are at the nexus of two family business empires: the Sheraton hotel chain, which your father built, and Perdue Farms, which was your late husband's creation, and which I think many of us experience on a pretty daily, weekly, or otherwise frequent basis with all the chicken that we eat nowadays. So when you think about family business, what are some of the linchpins that you have identified about what's crucial to keeping family in the business and the business in the family for more than that 3-generation cycle from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, as it were?
Yeah, that 3-generation cycle, there's a lot of academic research that shows that less than 1 in 1,000 families will make it to the 4th generation.
Wow.
So it's a really big deal. And to answer the one linchpin thing, I think kids have to be taught stewardship, that they're borrowing what they've got from the future.
Tell us about stewardship. What does that mean to you?
All right, stewardship means to me that, let's see, if you've inherited a family business, wonderful, enjoy it. But that's not your biggest job. Your biggest job is to hand it on in as good or better shape to the next. And how about that means being frugal, not just wasting it away on yachts and racehorses and gambling or whatever.
Sure. And how do we do that? Are there some good little key, like if rules of thumb, heuristics or mindset approaches, anything that you learned from your father originally or that you worked on building with your husband, as far as what has, because both of those, or at least especially Perdue, is still in the family. So what are some of the crucial items as far as rules of thumb to do exactly that, to be good stewards of a family business?
Okay, one thing that I would encourage for all family members, and how about for just people, is I think being frugal is a good approach to life. The Hendersons, to this day, my brothers and sisters and I, were hotel heirs, and we sold the company, but that meant that, there was money that went with the sale, so we are not poor. We rarely go first class. In fact, I never go first class, even if it's China and it's a 12-hour trip, which
Wow.
I've done probably 10 times. I think I'm an expert on subways in any city in the world. Wait, I'm exaggerating. There are several cities in the world where I know their subway system pretty well because I'm not going to take a chauffeur-driven limousine.
And that's interesting. Tell us why. So you would think, especially on a 12-hour flight to China from the East Coast, that's a long flight. I've done that trip. I've done that. I've lived in Japan back and forth a few times, been to China for business trips, etc. Boy, I would love to upgrade. And I keep thinking, if there's ever a time to splurge, that's when to do it, is when you're going to be in that sort of cattle car squish box for that long of a period of time. What's the rationale for not splurging on yourself, even in those kinds of situations?
Because I would honestly rather endure 12 hours of mild discomfort and be able to give $10,000 away to a charity than to spend it myself. And so I'm sitting there in that squished seat, and there's probably somebody overweight on one side and somebody snoring on the other side. So it's not lovely, but I'm thinking, I'm getting paid $1,000 an hour to put up with this. And I'm sleeping probably 8 of those hours. So it just, you asked the rationale. I think the rationale really is that this is how I was brought up. And by the way, the Perdues are the same, that you just don't slather money around. You don't get your identity from spending money. You get it from serving.
Yes. And the service mindset, that whole concept of servant leadership, I think, is something that people tend to forget. When you think about, and I think servant leadership is something that your father really prioritized as a mindset for building his business from the ground up. You told a story on the podcast, in very short form. If you'd like to elaborate on it a bit, just with regard to, your father started the Sheraton hotels, and with just one hotel initially in an area that was not doing particularly well. And
How about going bankrupt?
okay, yes. So I'm understating a bit too much, perhaps. This hotel is going bankrupt. All these people are going to be out of work. And he turned it around with what, to me, as you were telling the story, sounded very much like a servant leadership mindset. Do you want to tell a little bit about what his rationale was for how he was going to turn around this failing hotel?
Yeah, he said, at the end of his life, he had 400 hotels. And so I, as a little girl, was forever asking him, how did you do this? And here's the answer that he gave. It's the people at every level. If you can inspire the people who work with you to feel that they're part of the team and they're creating something wonderful, you can have success that you've never even dreamed of. So his goal was inspire, don't require.
Oh, I love that phrase, inspire, don't require. That's what I refer to, and I've spoken about it in a number of the different programs I've done, and even news interviews and things, but what I call a tweetable and repeatable soundbite. It's one of those things that I think as leaders, if we can take all our knowledge and distill simple phrases that are just so crystal clear that as soon as you hear it, you just get it, right? And when you get it, you can understand it, you remember it, and then you can tell others about it. And that's where those concepts, those learnings really can spread. People can evangelize your principles for you when it's so easy to make it stick that they can repeat it on your behalf or for their own sake, but indirectly on your behalf. So that inspire, don't require is so different, right? Whether you're just going carrot versus stick is not really the issue. When you inspire your people, you don't need either.
Exactly. I mean, he would actually say this, that when management is the art of getting things done through other people. And in his world, there were three major ways you could do that. Okay. The first one is intimidation, which is shape up or you're fired. Mm. But he said, what's wrong with intimidation is people do it grudgingly. I mean, they may do what you ask them to, but they're not going to do anything extra. Mm. They might even, it is not done with love and joy.
Sure, it's the letter of the law, right? The minimum requirement, okay, I don't like you, but you're making me do this, so there, I'll do the C- level. It's still passing, but it's not an A+.
Okay, so he was against intimidation as a way of getting people to do what you want. The second way, he told me the second way that you can get, at least in his world, the second way you can get people to do what you want is bribery. He could look at his employees and say, do a great job and there's a bonus in this for you, or do a great job and there's a raise in this for you. But he said, even that's not good. What's wrong with bribery is it's too transactional. People are going to work for the bribe rather than the greater good of the whole enterprise. And so
let's clarify just for a second that, because the word bribery in many people's minds can have a slightly different connotation to it. I think we're looking at the notion of financial incentivizing as the carrot on the end of the stick, not so much bribery in the criminal.
He's not slipping money under the table, but in the three approaches of there's intimidation, there's bribery in the sense of do a good job and I'll pay you.
Strictly financial incentive.
A financial incentive or maybe a corner office or whatever else.
Right, status.
Let's come up with he used the word bribe, but let's come up with a better word than bribe.
Well, it's I think it's fine if that's the word that he used. Then you're telling his story, so that's what he would call it. And that was his mindset, right? That this was effectively, and it's not to say that we don't need to pay our people well, or that people don't deserve raises and bonuses, but ultimately that shouldn't be the only motivation that they have for doing well, because they just want to get paid more and that's it. I think that's the concept of bribery. If I'm understanding, and if I'm misunderstanding, putting words in your mouth, please correct me, but my understanding of what you're sharing of your father's mentality was that if they're only working for the sake of that payment in one way, shape, or form, corner office, status, whatever it is, then that is a type of a bribe. It's just legal and not under the table of sorts. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out to me, because I knew what my father meant by it. But the word bribery has an unethical, terrible connotation to it. Of course, he probably meant that because he didn't like the idea of bribing people to perform better by paying them more. So, this is an interesting thing. We're talking about communication, and here's kind of the essence of it. The word bribery in his world, it meant getting people to do what you want by, I guess you could say, incentivizing them, but with a very specific thing, like a raise or a better office or a bonus or something.
Sure. Some
And
sort of payout.
yeah, now he wasn't against those, but he didn't find it to be as effective as the third way of getting people to do what you want, and that is inspiring.
And what does it take to inspire people?
Well, I mentioned in the podcast this morning something that he did with every hotel he ever bought, which is he'd invite all the employees. The first day that he had taken ownership, and they're meeting the boss, he invites them all into the ballroom of whatever hotel he's just bought. And he tells them, they're probably worried that they're going to lose the job because it would be typical for a new owner to take care of his friends and maybe his uncles and his nephews and give them jobs and fire people who are there already. Father made it a practice never to replace people who were there with his friends and nephews and uncles and so forth. Mm-hmm. No, everybody there got to keep their job. And so the first words out of his mouth is, I want you to stay here because I believe in you. I know that you know your job better than anybody else in the world. And my job is to give you the resources and the encouragement to show the world just how good you are. And then the really important part of it, he didn't want somebody, let's say that you're a maid who's making the beds or a guy who's tending bar or whatever. He didn't want them to think of their job as just making beds or tending bars. No, he wanted them to think that they're building the best, most successful hotel in the whole city, one that's going to be an inspiration to everybody else, and that you're part of a team. You are part of something bigger than yourself, and I value you. A good message?
Yes, that's beautiful. And that's very much in line with what I view as the servant leadership concept, as far as making sure that you are putting your people first, that you're taking care of them, of course, both financially, but also emotionally, and recognizing that they need to be happy and fulfilled and appreciated. And when they feel like you recognize their contributions and the importance of their contributions in making that whole that's greater than the sum of the parts, I think that's where that team mentality, that sense of belonging and that loyalty really stem from.
Well, Father was absolutely famous for the fact that if you started with him, you probably spent your life with him. And you made a habit of going the extra mile and figuring out ways to make it better. Because I don't think you build from one hotel to 400 without having a lot of people giving it their all.
Yes.
And he just plain said the success of this entire company is the people at every level, whether it's the managers or the
the bellman.
The bellman, yeah. That at every level, you want everybody working together as a team with the camaraderie of, we're producing something wonderful.
Yes, that's terrific. And how has that shaped your work moving forward in your own endeavors? Because you've done work in so many different places, from writing your books to your articles to the activism that you're doing within this fight. Tell us how that has inspired your leadership moving forward.
Father said people have a compulsion to live up to or down to your expectations. So I put a lot of effort into just believing in people. In fact, oh golly, I wonder if I can explain this well enough, but help me and work with me on this. It's a theory of life that's kind of hard to put into words, but here goes.
Okay.
I believe that, it's a definition of charisma. It's where you impose your reality on the people that you're with. And Father was charismatic because when he's standing up there his first day at the hotel, of owning a hotel, he's projecting his belief in them until they believe in it themselves. So he was imposing his reality on the people that he worked with, and it was a very beneficial thing. Oh, he also said, this is a little bit of a side tour, but he said that a leader's job is to give people a better vision of themselves.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, so he was standing there for the purpose of giving people a better vision of themselves. I'm not I'm not just a bellman. I'm not just carrying suitcases or making beds or waiting tables. No, I'm part of something fabulous and important and valued. But back to how this has influenced my own life, and the part that I'm going to have trouble explaining, but I'll give it my best. I have a feeling that everybody I work with, I'm 79. In my life, people who start working with me stay working with me. You have two reasons or two excuses for not continuing to work with me, and one is you die.
That would be, I would let people off the hook for that. Yes,
Yeah, I do. In fact, I was joking with my assistant and telling her don't die of COVID because that's a firing offense. And she got the joke. I mean,
sure, of course.
All right, so we let people off the hook if they die or to get married. And I'm kind of thinking that I must be a dating site or something, because in my life, I bet there are 10 people who during the time they worked for me got married and moved elsewhere. But like my assistant right now, we're in our 3rd decade together.
Wow.
So I think one of the things that rubbed off is believe in people, believe in them so much that even if they doubt themselves, your belief in them carries them through.
That's great. And the beauty of it, as of course, now that second reason for allowing people to leave you is perhaps even mitigated a bit more now, since so many people are working virtually. There's no need to be physically present. And I have a number of people, my assistant and my right hand, who helped me set this whole thing up today. The two of them, neither one of them lives nearby, and it's great. One's in my time zone and one's literally halfway across the world. So we've got 24-hour access and mobility. So you might want to tighten the screws on that one, so you don't have to let people go as much. They tend to get married. Now, of course, if they...
Okay, everybody who's connected with me through Win This Fight or the farms or anything, now the only reason you're allowed to leave is death. Death is the firing.
Now from all your people. The beauty is that you now get to continue to hug them virtually and appreciate all the value that they bring to you. Because clearly, if they're staying with you as long as they are, it's because you're an amazing leader with a vision that they believe in, that they want to be part of. And do you want to share a little bit about the work that you're doing with Win This Fight?
Win This Fight is, to me, what I want to devote the rest of my life and my resources to is fighting human trafficking. And I think everybody who's listening to us or watching us is aware of the term human trafficking. And I certainly was, but on April 11th of a year ago, I began learning more about it because I heard a lecture on it. And the speaker told something that kind of changed my life, and maybe it will influence our listeners. And it's a short story, but he said that a 12-year-old girl who's being trafficked will typically have to have sex with strangers 12 times a night, 365 days a year, until she dies, which is on average 7 years.
Oh.
And she's going to die of suicide or drug overdose or murder.
Well, that's a horrible thought. So what can we do about it? And what are you doing about it?
I had an absolutely wonderful scheme, but it's, and oh golly, since we're being careful with words, I won't use the word scheme. I had a wonderful idea.
Okay.
And it's on hold, alas, because of COVID-19. But here's the idea. There are large number, I'm a public speaker and I speak in front of family businesses, which means I've, in my Rolodex, I've probably got 10,000 names. And a lot of family businesses, they have a lot of resources, and they're frequently, or how about almost always, philanthropic. But if you ask them to take on a new charity, it's difficult because, like in my own case, when I first heard this about human trafficking and wanting to do something about it, I'm thinking, I'd like to write a great big check. But if I do, it means cutting back on other charities that I know that my contributions count. And I don't want them to have to suddenly readjust because I've got new enthusiasm. So I'm sitting in the audience thinking, do I cut back on the food bank? No. Do I cut back on the conservation things that I really care about? Clean water things? No. So what could I do? And then it occurred to me that I own a desk that we think was made in 1600, and it belonged to a de Medici cardinal.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, if I could sell that, first of all, it would get a lot of attention for the issue. And second, it might get a serious amount of money, because something that historic being auctioned, the press would cover it. And in the process of getting press coverage, I could tell about the issue.
Yes.
And I could tell about the organization I was going to give it to. That was the beginning. But then what happened next was I started thinking, I've got this Rolodex, I've got my 10,000 people. But a lot of other people are in exactly the same situation, that they'd like to do something, but they probably have whatever cash is available. It's already spoken for the charities that they're committed to. I mean, if you're on the board or whatever, it is hard to cut back.
Yeah.
But very often they might have something in storage or something that they're tired of. And it turned out that that was true.
Wow.
And the end of the story is I got amazing donations. For example, a 69 carat, almost perfect ruby, probably only one like it in the world. It belonged to a Chinese emperor from 300 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Okay, wait, give me a visual here. Help me. 69 carat ruby. I can't even imagine. Are we talking golf ball? Are we talking baseball? Are we talking what? I can't even imagine. What's a 69? How big is a 69 carat stone?
Think of a giant marble, and then think of a golf ball, and it's halfway between them.
Okay, that's a pretty darn big stone.
I have had it in my hand, and I'm looking at this thing. But the project is temporarily on hold because the auction house that was going to do this, it was Sotheby's.
Mm-hmm.
We had a long conversation in February where we decided that some of these million and multi-million dollar gifts that would be sold by Sotheby's, and it would go to the anti-trafficking organization of the donor's choice, that during COVID-19, it's not the right time to have a ultra high value auction. And the idea was effective enough that PBS did a half-hour program on it.
Oh wow! Is there a place we can go to get to get a link, or just pbs.com and type in search?
No, we put it on hold because when this fight is about raising money for existing anti-trafficking organizations, because I don't have any expertise in stopping trafficking, but I do have some in fundraising. And also the gifts were of such a nature that people would talk about them, and there would be radio, television, newspaper articles about each of the items. But it's on hold. So what do I do instead? I'm working on creating podcasts in which, and I'm doing it for an organization, but since we're still discussing this, I don't want to, we're kind of negotiating, and I believe they want me, and I know I want them. So it's highly likely, but I don't want to jinx it. Sure. But it's an international organization that encourages women, particularly women entrepreneurs, but they have as one of their causes anti-trafficking. And I could create a podcast which they would distribute, in which I could interview people from all over the world. And the first country is likely to be Botswana.
Oh, wow.
So I would interview heads of anti-trafficking organizations or the police or governments, and they would tell me what the problem is locally, what they're doing about it. And, I bet every country that exists has clever ideas that, best practices that others could copy. And then I could give them a chance to say what donations they need. And so I could get publicity and donations and awareness. So that's my plan. It's not there yet, but wish me luck.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So you'll have to, as things evolve, and is there a time frame perhaps when we should start to keep an eye out for this new podcast?
Again, I'm slightly afraid of jinxing it. We are totally discussing it.
Okay, great. But we will keep our ears open. And of course, when things do evolve and solidify a little bit and you have some dates, you'll need to let us know so we can promote your podcast. And we can
love that. Because, my career has been in communications, and I know that everybody's got a story, and my particular professional expertise over 40 years almost was finding out their story. And I think it's going to be fascinating, but it's not signed, sealed, and delivered yet. So,
well, no business deal is in the beginning, right? But we have, if there's anybody I have faith in to be able to get this done, it's you, considering you've managed to
thank
get
you.
so many other things done at the process. This just seems like another drop in the bucket as far as that's concerned for you. This will a little different direction, but not something difficult. And you're such an amazing podcast guest. So for anybody who hasn't listened yet, this is your opportunity. Please remember today, you go to iTunes or the other platforms, podcast platforms, if you don't happen to have an Apple device of some sort or other, or an iTunes account otherwise. Subscribe to the Speaking to Influence podcast, because that way you make sure that you never miss an episode. So stories like Mitzi's don't get lost in the shuffle. And then you'll also be able to get on our mailing list if you go to speakingtoinfluence.com, so that you can be aware of updates like this, so you don't miss live streams like this, so that when we share with you that Mitzi's podcast is going live, and finding out when her PBS special comes out and anything else that she has opportunity-wise, if you want to know about these things like I do, then get on the mailing list, subscribe to the podcast. They're two separate things, the mailing list versus the podcast, but subscribe to both. And of course, please remember to give us a 5-star rating and do write a review for us on iTunes. Spread the word, because these are the kinds of stories, leadership, philanthropy, activism, and leading with heart through good communication. This is what we all need to do. And I love these kinds of stories. Mitzi, what else has been going on for you behind the scenes? What are you involved in?
Well, what I'm just so excited about is I had an idea for a book in
check.
Well, in early February.
Okay.
And Mark Victor Hansen, who is a supporter of my anti-trafficking efforts, I got to know him through that. Mark Victor Hansen is half of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series.
Yes.
He's in the Guinness Book of World Records for selling more nonfiction books than anybody else. I think it's 500 million.
Oh my gosh.
Well, so I dared ask him, what would you think of a book in which we used your ability to inspire and my 40 years as a science writer and science communicator? And during 40 years, I've picked up a lot of information. And I also believe I've picked up a lot of information about not just what people can do and not do, but also how to sift through with whether something's true or not. I mean, that's my training.
Sure, as a journalist.
Well, so I suggested, what if we write a book that would help people get through the pandemic? Or inspirational stories and my science stories. And he said yes, and something like 3 weeks later, we had a book. And it's
magical.
Yeah, and his stepson, Preston Weeks, is part of this. So there are 3 authors to this book.
Okay.
But I want to share something absolutely fabulous that I learned from Mark.
Okay.
And that is, this is a man who's possibly the best marketer on the planet. I mean, you don't sell 500 million books without having genius level abilities.
I haven't quite reached that point with my book yet, but I'll let you know. It might be a week or 2 away. We'll see.
Oh, well, I have a suggestion for you,
Please.
or for anybody else who is trying to accomplish something.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to give the specific example of what he recommended to me, but generalize it out to whatever you're trying to do, and it has to do with visualizing.
Okay.
One day he told me, Mitzi, I know that you like to play with Photoshop. I want you to take a picture of the cover of our book, How to Be Up and Down Times, and Photoshop onto it this phrase, more than 1 million copies sold. And I said, but I don't want to get into false advertising. And he said, no, you get to see it, but we don't show it to the world, but print it out and then put it on your refrigerator, tape it to your bathroom mirror, tape it to someplace in your office, in your kitchen, everywhere, and just start visualizing 1 million copies sold. Well, within a couple of days of that, I got this from somebody I've never met before. A woman from Taiwan wanted to buy, well, actually, she bought 200 copies, and she wanted to buy an additional 1,000 for her store. or series of stores in Taiwan. And good Lord, does visualizing help with that? But then on top of that, like I have it in my stairwell in my apartment. And so there's no way I can go up my stairs without seeing a picture of the book without 1 million copies sold on it. And I start, it just gets me thinking, what else can I do? And it makes me think of opportunities and things that I might say. It's a wonderful mind exercise to visualize what you want. So I know you're the interviewer, but I'd like to ask you a question.
Oh, great. Okay, sure. This is just a chat. This is not an interview. People have their lunch. They're here to join, to listen. And by the way, remember, everybody, if you have questions or comments for Mitzi, type them into the chat, and we are very happy to field any questions that you've got. But okay, I'm going to brace myself to be on the
It's a real easy one. It's the easiest one you've ever heard. But tell me the name of your latest book.
It's called Speaking to Influence, Mastering Your Leadership Voice.
Okay, now what I'm going to ask, it has to be within the realm of possibility, but big thinking, okay?
Okay.
If you were to put on the cover of your book, and if you don't do Photoshop, I'll do it for you.
Okay, I'll take you up on that.
Okay, you got it. How many copies would you put? The job is realistic, but thinking as big as you possibly can think.
I like the 1 million. Can I use your example? That sounds great to me.
Go for it.
Okay.
All right.
That's my
because I'm a Photoshop black belt.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Rapidly.
So everybody out there, you're paying attention. You've heard it here. So I'm going to send a copy of my book cover, which you can find on Amazon or again on my Speaking to Influence website. And I'm going to send her a copy of it. And I will not put on the 1 million copies sold because I recognize, or otherwise I will, let me rephrase that. Okay, I'm going to go back and speak in English now and not have 4 thoughts coming out of my mouth at once. But I'm going to send her a copy of my book title. She's going to Photoshop more than 1 million copies sold on it just to send to me so that I get to visualize this. And I'm going to thank you in advance for doing that. And I'm going to let everybody out there know when it's done. And but if I do post it, I have to figure out a way to show you that I have followed through on my promise, but in a way that it is clearly indicating that this is just an artistic rendering. This is not actually the current book cover because we haven't sold 1 million yet. But that.
And I asked Mark, he said it's just for you and he asked me to send copies to him, which of course I did. But I said, is it legitimate to show people as something that's aspirational? He said, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not secret just as long as it's honest that this is aspirational. It's not that it actually happened.
Yes, that's the whole point. This is your visual, right? Some people refer to it as the law of attraction. Some people just say you have to put it out to the universe. Some people use visualization. There's lots of labels for these kinds of exercises, but I personally find them to be really valuable. I mean, I make a vision board every January for myself for the year, what I see long-term and what my big picture ideas are for what I'd like to achieve in the year. And it's really something about having it there in kind of poster format, just to look at it and say, yes, I want to be there. And there's something about that visual, that concrete image to look at instead of just some nebulous concept in your mind. It really hits home when you can see it there in Technicolor in front of you. So I love that suggestion.
Well, in some way, if I hadn't done this, and I bet I've got 5 copies throughout my apartment, if I hadn't done that, I think half the things that I'm doing to try to promote it, I wouldn't be doing. So it focuses the mind, and it's got to be the law of attraction, because where did the woman from Taiwan come from? So because I didn't try to sell it to her. She came to me. Sure. So that's law of attraction. But then the other part is, if you're thinking 1 million copies, you're also thinking, gee, how would I get there? What do I have to do? Who do I have to meet? What do I have to do? And so it's visualization. It's actually kind of new for me how powerful it is. It's again one of those things where I think I've heard for a good bit of my life, visualize, but I hadn't actually done it on this scale.
Sure. And to visualize in your mind is one thing, but it's another when you don't have to just imagine it. You can make it a physical image right in front of your very eyes. It just makes it so much more real when you can see that image. So, all right, everybody, go out there and visualize, create some sort of image about what you want your next big goal to be. Now, I have a question here that has come in, so I am going to pop it up here from Hollywood Coffee. Mitzi, the question is, if a charitable organization is looking to get attention, what's one of the best things that they can do?
Well, I asked myself that question, and that's how I came up with the auction. I'm going to presume that the organization has a board of directors, and they probably have members who, if you're in the board of directors, the chances are you're supporting them monetarily. Ask them if they've got something that they would put up for auction that has history. And it can be, hopefully it's something really valuable, but if it's got a huge story, like, I don't know, maybe it's historical or something, it would be just fabulous if you do the following things. Get a donation, probably from your board or your supporters, but it's not money, it's an object. Put it up for an auction, but the auction might be, I don't know, half a year from now or something, and then send out press releases to everybody who would have an interest in it. And I'm thinking radio, television, newspapers, social media, everything that will tell the story of the donation and then why it's needed and why you're making the donation.
There you go.
It is an attention-getting way. And I kind of think I probably didn't invent it, but I feel as if I invented it.
Well, so let me ask you a follow-up question then, Mitzi. Do you think that if people don't necessarily have tangible items that are physically auctionable, do you think services or the opportunity to spend time with someone or do an advising session with someone or some other kind of experience with someone also is a good auction item?
Okay, they're fabulous auction items, but since the question was getting attention, if you've got a celebrity chef, something that the media would cover.
Right.
So if you've got, for fundraising, yes, by all means, offer services. That's wonderful. But not everybody has what I'm about to describe, but some people will. You've got something, and maybe it's quite precious to you. Like my desk, and I get that not everybody has a 17th century desk, but if you have something that's historical, even if it's precious to you, with this desk, it is my most precious possession. It has so much history in my family, and there's stories behind it, and I loved it since being a little girl. So it's really precious to me. But I started thinking, I know what it's likely to bring, and I know what it's. Say it costs. Well, there are estimates of what it costs to rescue a young woman, and by the way, they're boys also. But for the sake of speaking, let's say it's girls at the moment. I know that the cost of what that desk was likely to bring at auction, that it might save 100 girls from a fate worse than death. And I'm thinking, what would give me more pleasure and satisfaction, looking at that beautiful desk, or thinking, I saved 100 girls? Yeah. And it doesn't take 2 seconds to decide that it would give me more feeling of earning my keep on this planet to think that I'd saved 100 people than that if I owned a physical object. So anybody listening to us, if you have something that's valuable, and it might be jewelry. I'll tell you one woman, I could burst into tears just remembering this, but I'd given a talk in, I guess it was Los Angeles. And at the end of the talk, this woman came up to me, and she was wearing these beautiful, beautiful earrings, this long and just staggeringly beautiful. And she said, these are my most precious possessions. My mother gave them to me. She wanted me to have them. But when I think that they could save people from a life of incredible misery, I would like to donate them. Wow. And I told her, but do you really mean this? I will hold on to them overnight, but since we're staying at the same hotel, I'd like you to have breakfast with me tomorrow morning.
Hmm.
And I'm going to give them right back to you if you feel like changing your mind. Because I was afraid, it's late at night. I gave a barn burner of a speech.
Sure.
I was afraid that, that maybe possibly between alcohol and emotions, and that I didn't want her to give her most precious possession and not mean it. She told me they were worth more than her house. Well, and this is Los Angeles, by the way. So
right. There are cheap houses in LA.
Well, so we had breakfast the next morning, and I asked her how she slept, and she said, I hardly slept at all.
Hmm.
And I said, here, take them back. And she said, no. The reason I hardly slept at all was I knew that these could play a role in producing so much improvement in people's lives that there's nothing on earth that I would rather do than give them.
That's beautiful. And that's the power of influence, right? There was no obligation, there was no carrot, there was no stick. It was all about inspiring her to realize the value that she could contribute and how important that this was. And I think that's really the essence of everything that we've been discussing today. So, Mitzi, tell us, how can people learn more about you, about this fight? Where would you like people to connect?
Okay, I would love them to go to my new website. It's antmitzi.com. And aunt is spelled as if it were uncle, except it's aunt, or Aunt Mitzi, MITZI.com. And you can get several chapters of the book, Win This Fight, free. If you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get 5 chapters, or you can order the book directly. And it's $4.58, which is pretty much the lowest price that Amazon would accept for a paperback. It's a $20 book, but Mark Victor Hansen and Preston Weeks and we decided we wrote this book to be helpful, not to make money. So it's the lowest price we could give.
Oh, that's so generous. And they can get that on Amazon. And I assume if they go to antmitzi.com, there's also a link to it there.
It will take you directly to Amazon, because I don't want to handle credit cards and everything.
Sure.
Oh, but and then there's a bigger reason. I don't really mind handling credit cards, but what I do mind is it has to be split 3 ways. And so I want to make sure that Amazon took care of that, not me.
Sure, which is certainly fair. And you don't want to have to worry about all the administrative tasks involved with that either. So, all right, everybody, go to Mitzi at antmitzi.com and look for one of her many, many books, all on incredible topics, ranging from Win This Fight and combating human trafficking to your biography of your husband. It's a tough man to make a tender. Remind me the phrase. Did I say it right?
Tough man, tender chicken.
Tough, right.
Business and life lessons from Frank Perdue.
Yes. And you've got all sorts of work out there on family businesses, again, keeping both the family and the business and the family. There's so much expertise that she has. So please go to her website and look up her links. And of course, please remember, before you go back to work today or wherever you are, go to iTunes and subscribe to my podcast, to Speaking to Influence, so you can hear Mitzi's episode, which just went live today, and hear the rest of her stories that she shared with us, as well as all of the other upcoming episodes and those that have already come. So download the episodes, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and leave us a review. We would really appreciate it. And if you had fun here, remember that at 5 p.m. Eastern today, we have a happy hour, an East Coast happy hour, where Lisa Peskin and Ellen Weber will be joining us live. And then we have a West Coast happy hour, because we like to be happy multiple hours in the day, at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and Michael Houlihan of Barefoot Wines and the audio will be joining. So I hope you'll join for us with all these different conversations, get to interact with your guests, with our guests, live one-on-one, and of course, keep following us, keep subscribing, and keep giving us your feedback. You can, of course, go to my website, which is speakingtoinfluence.com or vocalimpactproductions.com, and reach out to me. Connect on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do reach out to me personally on LinkedIn, please just let us know that you heard this broadcast today and that you connected through Speaking to Influence, because I like to know where all of my connections come from as well. And with that, Mitzi, thank you so much for joining me once again today.
Well, I love spending time with you. It's a treat.
All right, everybody, you have a great day, and we'll see you again at 5 p.m. Eastern.